Good morning, all of you. In fact, I fundamentally disagree with the terminology decolonization of Bharat. Bharat has never been decolonized. It is India, the urban, English-educated Indians who had been colonized. You go to the rural India, any part of the country, north, south, west, east, you would find that the Indian tradition, thought process, dialogues, all are based on our own traditional mode of thinking. Therefore, almost 90% of India, that is Bharat, remained decolonized. Neither Mughals nor British could make any substantial impact. So it is decolonization of India. The expansion of urbanization, I am leaving the British impact because almost we are past 8 decades. That can be discussed, that should be discussed. But almost after 8 decades of journey of independent Bharat, independent India, we are at the juncture when we have to delve into, which a great Indian philosopher, Krishna Bhattacharya in 1931 in Ashutosh Memorial Lecture in Kolkata very aptly called Swaraj in idea. So entire movement should be directed towards how to achieve Swaraj in idea. In Hindi we call Vicharon ka Swaraj. So firstly I have in my mind, in later on when Prabhuji will speak something, I will tell what is Swaraj idea. How can we proceed? We have one with a disclaimer that we Indian intellectuals developed a element that any problem comes, then we discuss. We are not futuristic in our approach. How to deter the future problem, number one. Two, we always count the problems. 90% we count the problems, the reasons for the problems, and 10% we delve into the solutions. So here I think this session would be important. If we come to the core conclusion of how to advance in the arena of Swaraji idea.
Rafiji, would I hear some thoughts from you?
Namaste and thank you VSK for having this summit and also giving me an opportunity to present my thoughts here. I believe that if we really want to understand the concept of decolonization and the content of decolonization, I think we need to understand the process of colonization. I agree with Rakesh ji by and large that Indian mind was colonized. In fact, Indian icons were created to colonize us. And it was not just Macaulay, but it was fundamentally Marx, Mill and Max Weber. Recently, in fact, I have written an editorial on reclaiming the real Hindu end of growth. But I'll just quote Marx because Marx has a very fundamental influence, especially in the academic part of Indian community, where he says in his 1853 essay on British rule in India. He says Indian civilization for ages is undignified, stagnatory and vegetative life, that this passive sort of existence evoked on the other part in contradistinction, while aimless, unbounded forces of destruction and rendered murder itself a religious rite in Hindustan. So for him, India had no history of its own. If at all there was a history, there was a history of incessant invasions. So I agree that Mughals and British could not damage Indian mind much. But what happened after independence is much more damaging, because the colonized minds started nurturing intellectual space and institutions on more fundamentally destructive lines. Especially after 1960s, the institution that I come from, Jawaharlal Nehru University, that actually laid the foundation for destroying the project of Swaraj in ideas.
Prafulji, I'm sorry to interrupt you here, but this precisely takes me to, the question that lingers in my mind. See, throughout, like you very rightly said, until the entire idea of the freedom movement has been on the basis of national consciousness, and media has played an immense role. I mean, call it Kesari, call it Swaraj, call it, Harijan, everything, they have played an amazing role. What really happened immediately post-independence? I mean, is it just the communist intervention, the communist ideology, or was it also a political discourse, or was it something to do with, I need to be approved as a nation by the West? Is it this tendency, or did all of them together? I mean, what are your thoughts? I would like to hear both of you on this.
No, Shamaji, we need to understand that the response to the media response during freedom struggle was not just media response. As you in your opening remarks said, decolonization for a lawyer would be entirely different from a media person. That itself is an Indian process.
Absolutely.
Our entire freedom struggle was Swadharma, Swadeshi, Swabhasha and Swaraj integrated together. By 1947, we believe that political independence is everything. We lost that steam, and the Nehruvian secularism and communism or ideas of socialism, they together, but still I said after 1960s, simply because till 1960s there were some voices, some minds who were deeply rooted, in Indian thought process. But the point that I was trying to make, that colonization was essentially deculturization, de-Hinduization and de-nationalization process. So instead of this talking just about decolonization, what I feel is we need to talk about decolonization for renationalization.
Okay.
Because, decolonization, as Hariji, one of the stalwarts in, the RSS school of thought used to say, ultimately it will be a darkness. Somewhere you need to, light a lamp, and that is the, the symbol of knowledge in Indian traditions. So, what is the process of lighting a lamp? Otherwise, just decolonization won't help.
Then do what?
That is the real challenge.
That's absolutely a question. Sinhaji.
Freedom movement, since 1885 to 1947, the Congress had not passed more than 3 resolutions on culture. It passed 223 resolutions on minority rights, protection of minorities, 223. Only 3 resolutions passed on culture, that too during the era of Lal Bal Pal, very small span in the Congress. What I connect with the process of colonization, you must read the treatise by Lala Lalchand, he was Punjab. It is a coincidence that two thinkers in two different provinces wrote almost the same thing in two regional papers. Colonel UN Mukherjee wrote Hindu a Dying Race, 1909. He wrote in Bengali, he was his son-in-law Surendranath Banerjee, in 31 articles that was collected in that book. By reading that book, Swami Sardhanand took 13 years leave from the Congress, and then he came with a book, Hindu Sangathan, a Savior of the Hindu Nation. That's a different thing. But Lala Lalchand pointed out a very, very important thing. He wrote 20 to 21 letter to the editors in Punjabi, not by his own name, by pseudonym Hindu. Every letter to the editor created a consternation in Punjab, a very debate in Punjab. So powerful letter to the editor was of Lala Lalchand. He was one of the founders of the Punjab and Sindh Bank. He was a great lawyer, great nationalist. His work came into as a self-abnegation in politics. I collected both the works in Sardhanand work, Is Hindu Dying Race, in a book. In that book, Lala Lalchand said self-abnegation from politics. Hindus think everything except politics. More spirituality, more social, more cultural, but not politics. That's why that the cultural elements led by Lal Bal Pal and their successor in future remain out of politics, and the political domination of the Hindus were in the hands of those who were colonized by Nehrus. That is one reason. But what I am pointing out, because again we will be trapped into the problems.
Right.
That is endless problem. What do we have to do? Bhattacharya said that political domination is visible. But domination by idea and culture is invisible. It comes very slowly. First you resist, then you become neutral, then you become its advocates. So here is two challenges before us for decolonization. That challenges bring us an assimilation of many thoughts. What we think that Europe is dominating in idea. Basically the idea is you can demolish the structure in a day. You have demolished the parliament, you created a new building. You demolish 10 buildings you can create. You can rename the buildings and the roads. That is a very small thing. But here is a thinking pattern of thinking. How to change? Here two thinkers are very important to all of us, although they don't are under our Hindutva purview. One is Franz Fanon. Many must have heard. Franz Fanon was once a Marxist, then Marxists disowned him as a racial Marxist. He said that colonial pattern is not a thinking pattern. It is a brutal domination of thinking. So all history should be ended. So he wrote a very important work. His work is very important. Second is Ngugi Wa Thiong. He is an African thinker. He says that language is not merely a communication means. It carries culture, history, thought process. So he himself stopped writing in English. He was a very famous English author. Petals of Blood is a very famous book, 1977 was published. He started writing Gukui. He first wrote the Decolonizing Mind in 1977. So these two thinkers should be, whenever we discuss the decolonization, in a small group or long group or big group, we must keep both the thinkers. And lastly, the third thinker is our own K.C. Bhattacharya, Professor Christian Bhattacharya. All these thinkers constitute almost a syllabus of our decolonization. They are the syllabus. So here I have been pointing out that what we have to do. We cannot say that everything coming from West is wrong. The whole discussion on Decolonization started by one subaltern school of Marxists, subalterns. Now Dipesh Bhattacharya, Dipesh Chakravarti and Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, what they are writing and what we are proposing have some common ground. So now we have to create a collage of the ideas to fight the Western domination, hegemony of ideas. That is my one point. Lastly, just in 30 seconds. Second thing is that without fighting the language, it is not a question of domination of English. Many times English has I believe that in last 300 years, 400 years, English has been the very powerful language of discourse because all the events of the world, cultural, social, political, have been discussed in English, so it developed a language of discourse. So it is not to fight the English. It is to resolve our own problem of diversity of language, multiple language. How to resolve? So we escape from that. All languages are equal. That is not the solution. They are equals. How to resolve? How to bring the Indian minds on a common ground of linguistic plurality? Number one. And number two, our diversity should be how to address our diversity. They are compatible or they are the identities. So these two discussions are very important to proceed on Swaraj in idea. Unless until we clean our mind on these two plans, it will be very difficult. Then we will remain academic and also we will say the same thing which West says. They also colonize, they also propose decolonization. So we would be trapped under the Western ideological conspiracy.
Sinhaji, just for a continuation of the same question, I mean, although now there are two aspects that I was able to gather from this. One is there is a process of learning that has happened in the mind, an unfortunate learning for whatever reason it is. Now the process of unlearning it is going to be more a challenge, because once we unlearn, relearning is not a difficult issue. Or rather, going back to the roots or being rooted is not an issue. Question is to unlearn. One, you also mentioned regarding the language not being a barrier, but there is also very popular understanding even amongst, for lack of a better word, Indologist, although I don't agree with the word Indology itself, but wherein they speak about that the non-translatables will have to be encouraged in order to, have the idea of unlearning. Do you think that aspect, considering that you spoke about the language not being a barrier, would encouraging non-translatables in English change the way we think or reset on the thinking model?
No, the whole problem is, you see, in Karnataka there are two villages you go today. You just survey culture, language, thinking pattern, value of life of the people. You do a very fast urbanization of these two villages in 2 years. And leave them 10 years. After 10 years you go to that village. You will find they are the same as Delhi in thinking pattern or Mumbai in thinking pattern. So it's a question of the pattern of urbanization is a Western pattern of urbanization. We plan urbanization as West too. We have to urbanize the thinking in terms of Indian mind, Indian value of life. We have to plan our economy, Indian way of life. If the economy would force a person to remain very far from the family, you cannot imagine the decolonized mind. So, erosion of the family, erosion of the communitarian life, these two, family and erosion of the family life and the communitarian way of life, that we live in the community. In urban, we create an artificial community. In rural area, there is a natural community life. So, whole thing is, we unnecessarily blame. In the past, when Shankaracharya was Kalindi in Kerala, and he came to Kasi. So, Kalindi to Kasi, there was no problem of language. They were different languages. So we have to give the importance to the people of India. We are giving importance to the forest, soil, industry, salaries, but not the mind of the people. No government since 1947 till today thinking in terms of the mind of the people. Polemics cannot resolve. We people in the RSS have to remake the nation. We are not the polemical contestants of the Nehruvian. Only abusing Nehruvian, abusing colonialists, abusing Mughals. It spoils our creative and constructive energy. They were worst. They did worst, we know. We have to think what is the best for us. And are we prepared? First we have to convince ourselves. When we see decolonization, whether it is an academic discussion or whether it is a pattern of life. If any proposal of decolonization, can I convince my son, my daughter, my neighbors, my school children, my college students? So we have to come with a practical solutions at the policy level, and lastly, what I feel that I am a self-critic of the Hindu society. Hindu society has been victim of the minority psychology. We are a majority community with a minority psychology. We see our all narratives, our speeches, our dialogues, all that we are in danger. They should be in danger, you are feeling danger. So right from 19th century till today, Rajnaran Basu, so till today, we are with the minority psychology. We have to give up our minority psychology. We are a majority community, we have to behave like that. Lastly, what to add this majority psychology? We have to think in terms of how to digest the odds in a constructive, whether by the Shastra or Shastra. Very frankly and forthrightly, how to digest, either by the dialogue, Samvada, or by using the force of the tark ki takat, or takat ki tark. So we have to use logic of power and power of logic. These are two main tools to decolonize and to advance further.
Prafulji, Sinhaji speaks about, the logic of power and the power of logic both. And he also spoke about the idea of, creating an organic way of, society, or like when he mentions the village and how the urbanization is an imposed idea upon us. Well, all of this was very natural until the 1930s or 1940s in Bharat. Maybe post, like you very rightly spoke about the academic world also, and how JNU was, that somehow takes me to the aspect of, for any art or any ideological thought, an intellectual activity to thrive, बोलते हैं ना राजाश्रय की, there is requirement of a rajashraya. In other words, here, should I say, a solid funding or some financial model that could be. Do you think this, the colonization of the ideas that happened was mostly because of the easy available funds towards those ideas, or was it also natural? The people who suddenly started, until the 1950s, 60s, you still see some very nationalist articles in the papers, but post 70s, you hardly see any of them. Again, there were a couple of them in the 90s who started writing. So, is this also related to a financial aspect of it, which forced a colonization of the ideas of the mind, or did they also believe in it? I'm focusing directly with the media itself, considering you come from that fraternity.
See, Shamaji, we need to understand that media is and has been essentially, in Indian context, the media that we see today is again a colonial project. Okay, one. Two, it is an extension of academia. So the terminologies, the ideas that come out from academia, how come somebody standing on a stage with OAC becomes secular and somebody standing with Yogi Ji becomes communal? Who derived it? You know, it was some PhD thesis started it. You know, the imagery of being a secular and a communal. We need to fundamentally understand that the colonization project, see, before British, everybody who invaded India we called Mlencha. We never considered them culturally superior to us, intellectually superior to us. What happened by 1930s, what the project that started in 1784 with the formation of Asiatic Society, what happened by 1930s, that suddenly a middle class educated Indian started feeling कि मेरा बेटा तो सांप बन गया. You know, that imagery, you know, the being Rakesh ji talked about urbanization, not just urbanization, the entire idea of development was equated with urbanization, Englishization and Europeization in thought process. So this was a very systematic institutionalized process of, you know, and it didn't happen that it doesn't mean that there was no response. Rakesh ji gave some names, but I would call 5 people from different ideological backgrounds. One response coming from Rabindranath Tagore in terms of Swadeshi Samaj. He says unless, you know, the water bodies, the temples, the education, the healthcare is controlled and owned by society, the Samaj is not Swadeshi. Then Gandhi in Hind Swaraj, when he critiqued Western civilization, he is essentially talking about decolonization. Deen Dayal ji, when he talks about Ekatma Manav Darshan, then this problem of somebody seeing it differently is resolved. Then to some extent, even Manvendranath Roy in his last phase of radical humanism comes to decentralized model and says, you know, the Marxist model of Europe is not relevant here. Or for that matter, even Ram Manohar Lohia, when he says Chaukhamba Raj and social, you know, Indian model of socialism, he is also trying to basically talk about decentralization. Please try and understand, we were a unified nation and a decentralized state.
Absolutely.
British turned us into a centralized state and divided nation. How to reverse this process? Now you are asking Rajashray question because our colonized mind feel that unless Rajya supports it, it doesn't work. On the other hand, an illiterate person, I'll give you just, you know, 2 examples, what needs to be documented. And this is the problem of people like us, educated, urban, you know, and the people who started perceiving कि ग्राम तो जो है वो पिछड़ा होता है, it's a backward thing. Gram is something to do only with agriculture. All these imageries are basically signs of colonization. I'll just give you 2 examples. Now the so-called New Year is coming, and most of the Bangaloreans would celebrate it 1st January as the New Year. But you ask some people from universities, the youngsters, and I did this, you know, I practically did this, to go in interiors of different Karnatakas. Now even Karnataka, I mean, I don't know whether it is politically right or wrong, especially a Marathi person talking about this. But that is true even with Maharashtra. We had different identities like Mysore, Karnataka, having different, kind of language, different kind of geocultural setting. The northern Karnataka,
Has a different food habit, different.
and then Hyderabad or
yes.
coastal Nizam Karnataka, now
Yes.
politically it is called. But suddenly, language was never our idea of identity.
Absolutely.
It was a means of communication, and that's why Shankaracharya traveling from Keladi to Kashi never had a problem. And before 1940s, in fact, until Congress formed its committees on the basis of languages, Congress committee for Kannada people, at that time more with Telugu people, then Marathi people, then Gujarati people. Until then we never fought on the basis of languages. What happened to us suddenly that we started thinking language is the soul, source of pride and identity? Simply because we started perceiving ourselves with the European construct of nation state, where language forms the source of nationhood. Okay? But I am talking about one simple exercise. You go to an illiterate person and ask only two questions. What is your New Year and why do you celebrate it? And I guarantee you, throughout India, you will get a different name for New Year. Even the name, not just the name, the timing would be different. Somebody will call it Bihu or Baisakhi or Varsha Pratipada or Ugadi or Vishu. But if you ask an illiterate person, why do you celebrate it? That illiterate person will give you the same answer. That is Bharat. That Bharat needs to be intellectually re-established. First January is the most fraudulent New Year, because it was not existing before 13th century. People who did not even know that earth is spherical. How can they even calculate 365 and 1/4 day? So they didn't have any idea of calculating a calendar. People who knew Panchang used to recontextualize it as per their location. That's why we had different New Years, because our agricultural cycles and our context with the 5-dimensional calendar that we had was, we had different thing. But the philosophy was different. So we are actually a unique culture, a unified culture that expresses diversely. What we are trying to do is, we are trying to find uniformity in the European context, and there we are trapped. We are fighting mostly on the European parameters of whether colonization, decolonization. Simply what we need to do is, academically we have to rigorously take the exercise. Media can be a support of it, and together we can actually reinvent the idea of unified Bharat and decentralized state of Bharat.
Absolutely. I mean, Prafulji, very well said. I mean, when you say unified Bharat and how media can do it, that's precisely a question that I want to ask both of you. Like what Sinhaji initially said, we've been identifying a lot of problems. It's a two-part question. One, what should be media's role in the process of decolonization specifically? And secondly, see, there's some expectation from the society with respect to the media. At the same time, I believe that the media also would have some kind of an expectation from the society. With respect to, both these expectations limited to the idea of decolonization, or rather going back, renationalism. So what should be the role of the media in renationalism, and what is the expectation of the media in this process of renationalized this one? This is a two-part question to both of you. Just before you could answer, we are at 10:45. The session will be until 11:15. So after this, we will be throwing, the session open for questions from the audience. So you can probably mentally also get prepared for your questions. Keep your questions short, one-liners, please.
Prafulji pointed out very, very significant aspect. Very significant aspect. In fact, that is the core of problem and also solution. That is the decentralization. You know why I said that Bharat could not be colonized, that India could be colonized. You see, in Delhi there was a statesman in Times of India papers during the colonial time, and certain other newspapers. But its limit was in metropolitan area. Tilak's Kesari and Maratha. Maratha was in English and Kesari was in Marathi. Gandhi's Young India and Harjan and Navjivan. B.C. Pal, Bipin Chandra Pal's Vande Mataram. And I am telling a small story of Swaraj. Very important that you the significance, so your question will get answered. How very ardent our thought. The three editors of Swaraj published from Allahabad were arrested. Then there was an advertisement in the newspaper. I am quoting in Hindi that advertisement as it is, under quote. स्वराज के लिए संपादक चाहिए, सेवा शर्त, सर्विस कंडीशंस, 2 सूखी रोटी और 1 गिलास ठंडा पानी, 2 ब्रेड्स एंड 1 ग्लास कोल्ड वाटर, और प्रत्येक संपादकीय के लिए 10 साल सश्रम कारावास की सजा. फॉर एवरी एडिटोरियल 10 years rigorous imprisonment. There were people to give the interview that it ended in 3 days. Large number of people came to give interview in Allahabad. That we are reading that. Makhanlal Chaturvedi wrote Pushp ki Abhilasha, you must have read. चाह नहीं मैं सुरवाला के गानों में गूथा जाऊं, मुझे फेंक देना बनमाली उस पद पर जिस पद पर जाए वीर ने. He wrote in the jail. Vande Mataram propounded the Indian thoughts. Mercy Arvind and B.C. Pal. He wrote Soul of India long back. Then Kesari was read in community life. One Kesari newspaper, his circulation was 1, but his readership was 100. So 100 of the newspapers, Madan Mohan Malviya's Abhyuday and Leader. So this created a community thought leaders, regional thought leaders, common thought leaders. Yes, I belong to Mysore and I am speaking about the foreign policy. Not necessarily the person sitting in Delhi is speaking about the foreign policy too. He has right to speak. I have the right to speak. So this decentralization of media has ended. Centralization of media is a very dangerous for democracy. Any centralization, whether centralization of wealth, centralization of economy, centralization of power, or centralization of media, that is deterrent to the democracy. If you want to save democracy, you have to publicly, assertively, without becoming a careerist, speak against the centralization. One. Second, your answer is that question that how to do that. You know, at a time when the Marxists, you go to the Marxist schools, we have a Bikram weekly here. Despite Panjan organizer, but our Swayamsevak read Bikram weekly. Not necessarily the author of the organizer would be read more appropriately than the author of the Bikram. And there is Tarun Bharat. Similarly, you see the Marxists. They instead of party organs, what Patulji rightly said, they penetrated in the media. Their thinkers are establishing the newspapers and journals. Their circulation 100, 200, 500, but they are making impact. Because that is called seeding impact, not the mass impact. That creates seeds for the thought. So what we have to do, that again we have to reverse the clock and create a decentralized media, writing. And that should not be guided by the metropolitan elites, what Marxists call metropolitan bourgeois, not metropolitan elites.
The question that you ask, the role of media. Again, the fundamental question is, what do you consider a media? Me sitting there in Delhi, editing organizer, somebody else branded as RSS mouthpiece, that is media. Then somebody calling themselves as so-called mainstream, is it media? The media that is run in the regional settings, whether ideologically driven or whatever, that is media. The media that has come now in a digital form, social media, that is just media. Or as before the Press Act in 1773 Regulating Act, and the way India used to communicate with each other, do you consider the akhadas talking to each other in Kumbh as media? If not, then we are colonized.
Colonized, absolutely. So right
If
now,
we are not considering the Vachik Parampara of Bharat as media, then we are colonized. So the point here is, the ideas that Rakesh ji is talking about needs to flow and intellectually articulated and picked up from below. One. But they had to be reinstilled in the society through various means.
Right.
Like for example, in Maharashtra I had a wonderful experience. Around last year, around 4,500 to 5,000 Kathavachaks came together. Most of them coming from different communities, castes, regions, districts of Maharashtra. Most of them are doing Katha either in Bhagavad or Bhagavad Gita or Ramayana or Mahabharata, whatever. But the common issues that they discussed in that particular event were about society, about nation, about youths, about addiction, about family, about challenges before nation, about national security. Now, do we even consider the media? So, my point is, for Bharat, media is a very comprehensive concept. Whatever we communicate with each other through different means is media. Everything needs to be re-energized and rethought. Everybody has a role to play.
absolutely.
Organizers will have an intellectual role to play. But Vikrama has a significant role while doing it in Kannada. Similarly, the smaller pamphlets that are published at very local level also has a role to play. But how are they communicated? Bharat communicated through oral traditions. Of course, I believe that once we have institutionally accepted and we have realized that many things that should have been documented we didn't, and we have faced problems because we should learn something good from the Europeans also. But ultimately, we should not forget that most of the things are communicated generations to generation through oral means. So we need to institutionalize them also. So in decolonization process, I believe, one, media has a significant role to play, even to give feedback to the academicians. Boss, you are disconnected. What we are getting on the ground, and I'll tell you. For example, I did one comparative study between the English media coverage of the so-called Gujarat riots of 2002 and the Gujarati media, and you will get a completely different picture of the same incidents. 180 degree different. So somewhere media needs to be a mirror to the power, as they generally say, but at the same time, it should be a very, it should connect. It should connect with the masses. And intellectually, they should, in fact, now show a mirror to the people sitting in high positions, in universities, in academia, in think tanks, in NGOs, who claim that what World Bank says is India, what some think tank in New York or Washington DC says is India. That needs to be challenged. I think media has to have a different kind of battle for Swaraj that used to be. We need not, get into the same mode, do roti or thanda pani or 10 saal ka imprisonment. But we need to at least generate a courage to stand for what is there, what Bharat stands for on the ground, and how it is still surviving as Bharat despite 1,000 years of invasions and aggressions.
Absolutely. See, like you, very rightly spoke about this idea of, how invasions. But there is still that one part of question, that answer that I'm still expecting from you is, how do you want the society to respond to you? I mean, that's precisely the reason why the mainstream media that we consider today has not been able to cross even the single-digit percentage of, its reach in Bharat. But for you to penetrate, there is also an expectation that you have from the society. So what is, I restrict here with respect to the mainstream, the so-called mainstream print and the electronic itself. What is your expectation from a commoner? As an editor, if I ask you this question.
From the
common masses, rather from Bharat.
See, what has changed post 1980s and 90s, especially post Rama Janmabhoomi movement, that there is a definite sense of cultural resurgence across communities, across states in India. Now that has been channelized with different ways and different identity formations also, because it is not a very linear process, it is a very complex process. What I expect is, earlier, when I took over as editor organizer, monthly I used to get at least 25 to 30 letters. Monthly I'm saying. Now, people are more reacting through either emails or through their responses on web page itself. But what has changed? Those serious reflections of readers on the content. We, as a society, unfortunately, due to the social media and digital space influences, have become very, very impulsive. We don't want to get into, we are into a momentary mode. Right. Sometimes we are in Dangal mode, then we are in Dhurandhar mode, and then, so modes quickly change. Then suddenly, Bihar election mode to Kerala local election mode. So, what I believe that these things will be there and these things are important, but at the same time, how do we perceive, this contradiction we need to realize. There is one state related or our profession related realities, calendars, deadlines, but there are lifelines which are there in our family, with our panchang, with our kulachar. How to manage this contradiction, and which media is in a better position to help us in handling this contradiction. There is a contradiction, but how can we help it? In fact, I'll just share my experience as a student. That time, interestingly, I had nothing to do with organizer. I was just a student in JNU, but I was fortunate enough to, interact with Manya Sheshadriji, who then was General Secretary of RSS. And I used to write pamphlets for Vivekananda Vicharamanch in JNU, so many times he used to call me when he was in Delhi. And in one of my conversations, I asked him, when Sangha is so particular about Indian languages, primacy to Indian languages, then Dindayalji or Guruji, who were more particular about nationalization of intellectual discourse, one media house that started, which is branded to be RSS mouthpiece or at least inspired by RSS school of thought, why the first publication was started in English? And Sheshadriji gave a very interesting reply. Sheshadriji said, what is the problem in English? Because that time most of the people, whoever have gone to school, could understand the national issues only in English.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that we neglected other media platforms. The point was, he gave a very, cryptic kind of reply. Organizer was meant to communicate with the policymakers of Delhi, not with the masses. That was his reply. So, what is the media platform whom we are communicating with? So, if we are, he said, Bharatiya viewpoint should be communicated to the people who are in policy making. That's why organizer was started. Primary responsibility of organizer to present Indian viewpoint in English to the people who do not, whose first language of reading and communicating is not Indian. Or rather, I would say Indian English is their primary source. But unfortunately, last week only I met many of the English researchers, professors who have worked on various issues. And I asked them, what is your PhD topic? What is your research topic? What is your specialization? In media, how much do you contribute? And none of them, all of them want semiotics, linguistics, Shakespearean literature, Victorian literature. I said, how many of you have worked on Indian contribution to English?
Right.
And none.
Correct.
That is the problem.
That's a challenge. भाषा उनका है और भाव हमारा होना is a huge challenge. We are 11:05. We have just about 7 to 8 minutes time. We are open for questions.
Just 30 seconds. You know the two things. So what is the response of the people? Very two important things. You see, the RSS movement successful because the movement was not led by careerists. They were not careerists in public life, political life, social life. So in intellectual field, the careerist cannot do decolonization. So non-careerist intellectuals we require one. Second, Bauddhic Kshatriya, and I would end with a very small story. Lord Curzon had a problem. There was a bitter controversy on the pronunciation of Sanskrit slok in Oxford University, head of the Department of English, and Cambridge University of head of the Department of Sanskrit. The problem was sent to Lord Curzon. Curzon sent it to in Kasi, a Sanskrit, government Sanskrit college principal. He found one Mr. Gangadhar Pandey. He was a very good scholar. He was a pupil of Raja Ram Pandey. He called him. He said कि I would not go in the pant shirt. मैं उसी ड्रेस में जाऊंगा. कर्जन ने मुझे बुलाया है तो मैं वैसे ही जाऊंगा. मैं जो पहनता हूँ. So there was a controversy 2 months. So ultimately Curzon agreed that he let him come in dhoti and Jenu. He went there. Then he resolved the problem and he started speaking. After 1 hour's conversation, Curzon asked me कि आपकी डिग्री क्या है? How much you study? तो he said कि ये मुझे मालूम नहीं है. और हिंदी में उसका मैं कोट करता हूँ उनका कि इस ब्रह्मांड में कोई ऐसा शिक्षक मिल जाए, परीक्षक मिल जाए, any examiner, if you could find any examiner in this universe who could examine and tell me my knowledge, then I would be grateful. So he was a Bauddhic Kshatriya. Stood one in the firmness of the culture, firmness of his knowledge, and दूसरा non-careerist intellectuals. यही दो decolonization कर सकते हैं. Otherwise it will remain for another 100 years a subject of discussion. We will continue discussing and remaining decolonized.
Yes. Can we have some volunteers, please? Yes.
Hello. I have a question for Dr. Rakesh. English has often been problematic for Indians. To make it serve our interests, help us decolonize the Bharatiya mind, don't you think that we must appropriate it as a medium to articulate and present our civilizational values and ethos to global community?
You very rightly pointed out, as I earlier said, that why English is a language of discourse in the world. Because World War II, World Wars, and all the civilizational culture events took place that had been articulated by the English language. So it evolved itself as a contemporary language. This does not mean that French, Hindi, Kannada, Malayalam, these are all backward language. They are good language, but the language of discourse is English. So, having said that, while speaking, reading, writing in other languages, we have to appropriate English. As Vande Mataram was in English, Maratha was English, Young India was English, Malvia's leader was in English. So we have to appropriate this language for our world mission. And also, This is a fact that some kind of linguistic dispute is in the country. Some linguistic groups are now claiming the supremacy of language. For that reason, we evolve ourselves to next stage of nationalistic consciousness. We have to utilize English in a better way to present all the natural resources, human resources, natural and the intellectual resources of the country. As I am saying that, I adopted a village in Meghalaya, that is Conclave. This was not known to the people of Shillong, not known to the government, not known to the Nehu University. It is far away from Shillong. That is a whistling village. Mother gives a child a tune, and they call each other that tune, just like cuckoo. This becomes a name. So I adopted that village. I learned the Khasi language there. I communicate there. So I find no contradiction between them and me. So I think that you are very right, and we should utilize that.
See, the answer is very simple. We never had any issue with adopting any language. The question is, at worst case, in worst case scenario, if 10% people could understand, read and communicate in Sanskrit when British arrived, I am talking worst case scenario. If that was elitist and Brahminical, after 200 years of English education, still even 10 to 11% people are understanding and communicating in English. Why English is a language of opportunity and Sanskrit is a language of Brahminical imposition? That is the question that we need to address in the election.
In my opinion, we identify ourselves as Bharatiyas. Decolonization occurred automatically. In 1948, H.V. Kamath proposed constitutionally naming our country as Bharat. But House could not reach any consensus and deferred the proposal indefinitely. Again, in 1949, he asked the House, how much time do we require to change the name to Bharat? Now, after 75 years, I am asking the same question. Still, how many more years we require to constitutionally change, constitutionally name our country as Bharat?
Constitution has already called us Bharat, ma'am. The problem is these people, coming from legal fraternity. India that is Bharat has been there in the constitution, and if you see the Constituent Assembly debate, they are exactly talking about what do they mean by it. Their content is very much Bharatiya. What has happened, state-wise and judiciary-wise and bureaucratically, the way India, about English, how did we come with this concept called national language? Absurd. In Constitution, there is no word called national language. It is official language for state communication. So if you want to write to the Prime Minister, you need to communicate in Hindi or English. How many times do you communicate with Prime Minister? Common Indian, does he or she has to communicate with the Prime Minister on a day-to-day basis? So official language and national language are two different things. But many things in Constitution have come across or evolved due to interpretation, legal colonial interpretation. We need to revisit that. Otherwise, we will get into this discourse of, Constitution. Constitutional discourse has been the most trivialized discourse in India. On the one hand, this has nothing to do with India, it is a colonial constitution. On the other hand, no, this is most sacred text, nothing can be changed. And both the arguments are un-Indian, un-Hindu. Because anything revolutionary or not accepting anything, both the things are un-Hindu.
Prafulji, I will add this. Your question is very important, that reason that there was a fraud in the Constituent Assembly. I call it a fraud. You see, when the Article 1 came for discussion, the name automatically came India, that is Bharat. Then H.B. Kamath was a very active member of the Constituent Assembly. He said, who did that? He gave another amendment, Bharat, that is known in English India. And a very good speech by one gentleman, new generation might not be knowing that. Kamlapati Tripathi. He was at the time railway minister when Indira Gandhi in his press conference said that railway is not functioning good. He resigned from the ministry. The most powerful, beautiful speech by Kamlapati Tripathi. So Bharat should be named. H.B. Kamala, all the people spoke for the Bharat. Not a single person in the Constituent Assembly spoke for a single minute why it should be India. Still it remains as India, that is a Bharat. So this was a constitutionally fraud on the people of India by the Nehruvians. And only person who was responsible, that was Nehru. He imposed, from the shadow he used to control the Constituent Assembly. Whatever you debate, whatever I would like, that would be. That was his controlling authority, virtual controlling authority. I think that fraud must be corrected.
One last
Sir.
question we have. Yes,
Namaste.
Mr. Pramod, yes.
My question is to Professor Rakesh Sinha, sir. Sir, you were talking about intellectuals who are non-career oriented, who have to work for the purpose of decolonization. So, where does that leave the career intellectuals, or already those who are in academics or in teaching roles or in research roles? Where does it leave them? And what can we do in order to involve in the process of decolonization, because that is also an important exercise. But can we only ignore them, or is there a solution to this? Because you said in the next 100 years also, we will still be talking about the same subject.
You so see, not in India or Bharat, all over the world and throughout the civilization, university could not produce the single idea which could become the paradigm. Karl Marx was not a professor. We disagree, but he created a strong ideology. Freud was not the last, when he wrote, ultimately was not a professor, he came out of university. Chanakya was not, Kautilya was not the professor, he was out of academics. B.C. Pal was not professor, Mahasi Aurobindo was not professor, part of the university system. Bal Gangadhar Tilak was not the part of the university system. Deen Dayal ji was not the part of university system. Sri Guruji came out of the university system, then he propounded the true, genuine sense of Hindutva. So my advice is that it is not that we should leave the professorship, we leave the teaching or PhD. While reading and writing, I should not see my prospect. I see the prospect of idea. That is not career intellectuals. If I will speak here decentralization of power and wealth, and my political career will be dismantled, then I will be a non-genuine intellectual. Then I am a press release. If I am honest to my posterity, I am honest to my mission, I am honest to my ideology and committed to the future of India, then I have to speak what I feel. You may disagree, you may dismantle, and you have to be ready for the जिसको कहते हैं प्रतिकूल परिस्थिति, adverse situation, facing the adversities. All the thinkers have been celebrated post-death. During the life, not a single thinker all over the world has been celebrated. Neither Plato, nor Rousseau, nor Kautilya, nor even Deen Dayal is much more celebrated after his death. So, the non-career intellectuals means rigorous intellectual activities for the sake of idea. You take one idea, proceed entire life and do that. It was a Marxist domination in Delhi University in 1988-89. I was a topper. I have given an application that I would write a dissertation on political ideas of Dr. K.V. Hedgewar 1988. When in 1989 there was Dr. Hedgewar's centenary year. The one professor, late Professor Mahendra Kumar, was sympathetic to me, was a congressman. He came out of the interview. He said, Rakesh, you take professorship first, teaching. Then whatever you want to write, you are a topper, you will get lectureship. Then you write whatever you want to write. Otherwise, they will not give you the teaching. I said, if I will compromise here, then I will compromise then also. I would do that. I talked, but it took, I had to, a Delhi University topper. I am not celebrating myself, just I am giving example. It may be Rakesh Naik, it may be Prabhu Kedkarji, he faced more adversity in JNU. I had to face 41 interview to get a permanent position. 41 interview. And that too I got a very evening college teaching. A Delhi University topper, throughout I have been topper, BA, MA, 10th, 12th. With 4 gold medals I am in evening college. But I wrote on Dr. Hediwar's political ideas of Dr. Hediwar in 1989. Later on I did research 10 years and got in 2003. Marxist domination does not stop you using library, using archive, reading at your home for 5 to 6 hours. Who stops you? So I advise all of you, the particular youngsters, whether you are a faculty of science or psychology or social science or electronics, evolution of idea has always been done by mostly non-social science people. So you do that, start today, and you will find the result after a decade.
See, what Rakesh is saying, you just 2 sentences. One, public intellectual exercise should not be linked to degrees. You know, Sandeep is sitting here. He has been doing, a lot of work. It should not be linked to degrees and your, position in university system. 1. 2, it doesn't mean that university system should be left out, but some ideas should be provided because the structure is so colonial. The terminology and the institutionalization process, so it will be very difficult. But like for example, we did in Maharashtra and Uttar Pradesh now, we have started with some universities under NEP, some projects on the yatras and the melas that are happening in the rural parts of Uttar Pradesh and Maharashtra. Now, to my surprise, studied in Maharashtra, worked there, I was at some point of time part of university system. There are more than 37,000 yatras and melas in Maharashtra. Only in Maharashtra. And many of us do not even know their cultural impact, their social impact, their economic side, their what caste and communities participate in which deity. And to my surprise, 33,000 of them out of 37,000. Of course, there are some urus and there are some dargahs also included in it. But around 33,000 of them actually collect funds without state support. They run it, they run through community contributions, and then, see, that is Bharat. They actually submit their balance sheet to the deity after the event. And if some amount is remaining, they will utilize for that temple or surrounding infrastructure or something. Once the zero balance is there, they declare yatra is over. That is Bharat. But no economist or social scientist has ever documented it. That is the challenge we need to accept.
That is such an amazing closure to this session. But of course, Prafulji has already laid out the foundation for the next session by flagging the judiciary, and of course there are others who will be taking the flag for regarding constitution, democracy and the Bharatiya mindset. It was a pleasure to have you both here, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.